What if you were wrongfully convicted for a crime you didn't commit? What if that crime was as unthinkable as the murder of your own children? Enter the world of Kathleen Folbigg, an Australian woman whose life turned upside down in 2003. She was accused, tried, and found guilty of the most atrocious crimes a mother could face, the murder of her own 4 children. The case against her was largely built on her personal diary entries, fragments of her thoughts and fears, scribbled down in the solitude of her own home. These entries, fraught with emotional turmoil, were interpreted as confessions of guilt, despite their ambiguous and unreliable nature. The prosecution painted a picture of a mother capable of the unthinkable, using her private musings as the damning evidence. But let's pause for a moment and consider the weight of these words. A diary, a place where one pours out their deepest thoughts, fears, and anxieties. Can such a source be deemed reliable enough to condemn a person? Are these pages of raw emotion enough to conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that Kathleen was indeed guilty? The diary entries were the cornerstone of the case against Kathleen, yet they offered no concrete evidence, no definitive admission of guilt. They were, at most, a window into a troubled mind, a mother's grief misinterpreted as murderous intent. The conviction was swift and decisive. Kathleen Folbigg, once just an ordinary woman, was thrust into the spotlight as a child killer. Her name became synonymous with a crime so heinous it's almost unimaginable. A mother, convicted and sentenced, her life changed forever, but what if there was a chance she was innocent? Stay with us as we delve deeper into this chilling story of justice, conviction, and the relentless pursuit of truth. For 2 decades, Kathleen remained behind bars, but she wasn't alone. She had a team that believed in her innocence. This was not a group of people who idly stood by. They were active, they were vigorous, and they were unyielding in their pursuit of justice. They knew that the truth was on their side, and they were determined to bring it to light. Their relentless efforts led to a formal inquiry. The inquiry commissioner, Tom Bathurst, took a deep dive into the case. He sifted through the evidence and he found that there were discrepancies. The diary entries that had been used against Kathleen during her trial were not as damning as they had been portrayed. They didn't contain concrete, reliable admissions of guilt. This revelation was a significant turning point in the fight for Kathleen's freedom. But the team didn't stop there. They knew that they needed more than just doubts to overturn a conviction. They needed concrete evidence. They turned to science, to the realm of facts and figures that couldn't be disputed, and they found it. They found new scientific evidence that suggested Kathleen may not have been responsible for her children's deaths. There were identifiable causes for 3 of the deaths, plausible explanations for the other 2. This was a game changer. The new evidence cast a significant shadow of doubt over Kathleen's guilt. It challenged the narrative that had been constructed around her, the narrative that had kept her behind bars for 20 years. It was a beacon of hope in a sea of despair, a lifeline for a woman who had been drowning in a sea of accusations and convictions. With the emergence of new evidence, the tides began to turn. Hope was on the horizon. In June 2023, after 20 long years, Kathleen stepped out from behind the prison bars. But her fight wasn't over yet. Freedom. A simple word. But for Kathleen Folbigg, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. After 2 decades of incarceration, she was released from prison. But this was not the end of her journey. Far from it. The battle to clear her name was still very much alive. In the pursuit of justice, the inquiry commissioner, Tom Bathurst, played an instrumental role. His final report shook the very foundation of the case that had convicted Kathleen all those years ago. He found identifiable cause for 3 of the deaths. And for the other 2, plausible explanations were present. The diary entries, once seen as the irrefutable evidence of Kathleen's guilt, were now under scrutiny. Bathurst contended that they did not contain reliable admissions of guilt. This was a significant development. The narrative was shifting. The truth was beginning to emerge from the shadows of doubt. And yet, the battle was not over. Kathleen was now free, but her name was not cleared. She was still seen in the eyes of the law, and perhaps the public, as a convicted criminal. The fight to overturn her convictions was still on. This struggle was not just about Kathleen, but also about justice, truth, and the pursuit of fairness. This was more than just a legal battle. It was about a woman's life, tarnished by accusations and a conviction that was now being questioned. It was about the loss of 4 innocent lives. It was about the truth that had been buried under 20 years of doubt and suspicion. But even in the face of such immense adversity, there was a glimmer of hope. The wheels of justice were turning, albeit slowly. Kathleen was out of prison, and the fight to clear her name was gaining momentum. The quest for truth was far from over, but for the first time in 2 decades, Kathleen could see a light at the end of the tunnel. The fight for justice was far from over, but for the first time in decades, Kathleen could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Every story has an ending. For Kathleen, this ending was a long time coming. Imagine spending 20 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit. Imagine the frustration, the desperation, the sheer agony of it all. That was the reality for Kathleen Folbigg. But in 2023, 2 decades after her conviction, Kathleen's story took a turn. An inquiry into Kathleen's case found that there was reasonable doubt of her guilt. The inquiry commissioner, Tom Bathurst, said in his final report that there was an identifiable cause for 3 of the deaths. The other 2, he said, had plausible explanations. And the diary entries, once considered as damning evidence of guilt, Bathurst noted that they did not contain reliable admissions of guilt. It was a revelation that cast a shadow of doubt over the entire case. This new evidence was enough to get Kathleen released from jail in June of that year. But that wasn't the end of her story. Kathleen was seeking more than just freedom, she was seeking justice. And justice, it seems, was on her side. After an intense legal battle, Kathleen's convictions were overturned. The court acknowledged the possibility of a grave mistake, of a woman wrongfully convicted. But the fight wasn't over yet. Kathleen now had to deal with the aftermath of her wrongful conviction. She sought compensation from the state for the years she lost, for the life that was taken from her. It was a small consolation for the 2 decades of freedom she was denied, but it was a start. Justice delayed, but not denied. Kathleen's story is a chilling reminder of the flaws in our justice system and the power of perseverance in the face of adversity. In a world where justice is expected, Kathleen's story shakes us to our core. This tale of struggle and triumph, spanning over 2 decades, is a stark reminder of the fallibility of our justice systems and the human cost of wrongful convictions. Our journey began with Kathleen Folbigg, a mother unjustly convicted for the unthinkable, the murder of her 4 infant children. The year 2003 saw her sentenced to prison, branded a criminal, and her life as she knew it was replaced with cold iron bars. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, the flame of hope was never extinguished. Kathleen, supported by a band of unwavering advocates, fought tirelessly for her freedom. Every day, every month, every year, they battled against the odds. 2 decades later, in the year 2023, their perseverance bore fruit. The emergence of new scientific evidence cast a shadow of doubt over the original conviction, breathing life into their campaign for justice. Her release from prison in June of that year marked a pivotal turning point, signaling the beginning of the end of Kathleen's ordeal. But the journey didn't end there. The fight continued until the final verdict. A few months later, Kathleen's convictions were overturned on appeal. The woman once vilified and condemned was now free, her name cleared. Kathleen's story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of questioning and challenging convictions. It underscores the need for continuous scrutiny of our judicial processes and the pursuit of scientific truth. This tale teaches us that justice isn't always served in the first instance, and sometimes the fight for it can span a lifetime. Kathleen's story is not just a tale of personal triumph, but a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth and justice. It's a narrative that echoes in the hallways of courthouses, resonates with advocates of justice, and touches the hearts of the innocent wrongly accused. It's a story that, once heard, is never forgotten.